Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to bring something to you guys that I've never shown you guys before, and I know y'all see the Invoked stuff and it's like, Silver, you have shown us Invoked before, but today I'm actually showing you guys my Invoked Mekk-Knight build. So without saying all too much, let's go ahead and jump on into the deck profile. Starting off, of course, we do run our 3 copies of Alistair the Invoker. This card is really powerful, of course, being able to normal summon this card and then search out your copy of Invocation. Also, this card has a second effect that says that you can discard this card from your hand to target one of your invoked fusion monsters and increase that monster's attack by 1,000 until the end of the turn. Continuing on with that package, of course, you do run 2 copies of Invocation. Invocation is just a fusion spell that says that you can fusion summon by using monsters in your hand. However, if you are using for a invoked monster, you can use monsters on the field or graveyard as well, but you must banish those targets. And then we do run 1 copy of Book of Law. Book of Law is kind of like the magic change of this deck, being able to target 1 invoked monster you control, send it to the grave, tribute it, and then you can special summon 1 invoked monster with a different attribute from your extra deck. One of the main uses for this card, of course, is to go for a OTK. So the main thing is you want to go into Purgatorio, and then you want to tag it out with the Book of Law to go into any of your other invoked monsters. Pretty self-explanatory. Not many people run this card. However, this card is just really powerful to help close out games. Then, of course, we do run 3 copies of Magical Meltdown, of course, to be able to search out your copy of Alistair the Invoker. Then this card also says that the activation of your cards with effects that include the effect of fusion summons a fusion monster cannot be negated, so therefore you can't have your opponent negate, let's say, your Invocation. Also, your opponent's cards and effects cannot activate when a fusion monster is summoned using, of course, any fusions, and you can only activate 1 per turn. However, we also do run Terraforming to kind of act as our 4th copy of Magical Meltdown. So that's it for the Invoked engine in the deck. Continuing on into the Mekk-Knights, and of course continuing on into the Mekk-Knights, who of course run 3 copies of Purple Nightfall. I am planning on getting the secret rares fairly soon. I just couldn't afford them at the time of recording, even though yes, they're like $4 a piece, maybe $3. However, this card is really powerful. It has the effect of all Mekk-Knights that if 2 cards are in the same column, you can just special summon this to a open monster zone. Of course, that has the 2 cards on the field. And then, of course, this card has the effect of you can banish this card from your field to then search for a copy of any Mekk-Knight and add it to your hand, and then this card will return during the next standby phase. So therefore, pretty much this card is just really there to special summon, banish, and then return back to your standby phase after searching out either your copy of Mekk-Knight Blue Sky or even your Indigo Eclipse. Mekk-Knight Blue Sky has the effect that when this card is special summoned to a zone that 2 monsters are in the same column or 2 cards are in the same column, you can then search your deck for Mekk-Knights equal to the number of cards your opponent controls in the same column. So if they have a monster in that column, you can search for 1 card, or if they have a set card or an activated card and a monster, you get to search off 2 cards. And then Indigo Eclipse, of course, being able to special summon to a zone that have 2 cards in the same column, you can then just move this card pretty easily, or any of your other Mekk-Knight monsters in that matter. And then we do run 1 copy of Red Moon as well as 1 copy of Yellow Star. These cards have very similar effects. Of course, they can special summon themselves. However, Red Moon says that you can banish 1 Mekk-Knight monster from your graveyard to target 1 face-up monster in this card's column to destroy it. And then, of course, Yellow Star does the same thing, however, it's for traps or spells, of course. And, of course, all of the Mekk-Knight monsters are light monsters, so that way you can be able to get into your Mechaba, which is just really, really powerful. And then moving on, we do run 1 copy of Gamma Seal, 1 copy of Godarla, 1 copy of Dogoran, and 1 copy of Jizukiru. Of course, we run these to be able to tribute our opponent's monsters, as well as just get a type on the field that we really need. And, of course, we do give our opponents that using Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, for those who don't know what this card does or have not seen my Yosenju build that I did with this card, Interrupted Kaiju Slumber just says destroy all monsters on the field, kind of like a Dark Hole effect, and then you can take 2 Kaijus from your deck, special summon 1 to your side of the field, and then 1 to your opponent's side of the field. This card also says that during your main phase, except the turn that this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard to add 1 Kaiju monster from your deck to your hand, and of course you can only activate 1 per turn. This card is really good just to be able to clear out cards, as well as giving your opponent a monster for for another card that we run in the extra deck, which we do run the Crusadia Equamax, just to be able to gain attack, as well as, of course, just being able to put up monsters in your opponent's side of the field, so that way you can have your columns if you want. Moving on into some more board breakers, we do run 3 copies of Nibiru. We run Nibiru for pretty much the same reason why we run the Kaijus, just to be able to clear out our opponent's field, as well as give them a token which will help us to be able to set up our columns, so that we can summon our Mekk-Knights fairly easily. Of course, I don't really think I need to go into this card all too much. Continuing on, I do run 3 copies of Ultimate Slayers. Ultimate Slayer says that your opponent cannot activate monsters in response to this card. Then you can send 1 card from the extra deck to the graveyard, and then target 1 monster your opponent controls with the same card type, Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, Pendulum, or Link, and then shuffle that card into the deck. I will show you guys some of the targets that we do run for this card, but this card is literally just a non-destruction removal, so that way we can just be able to use this to help clear out boards easier. Continuing on, we do run 3 copies of Super Polymerization. Super Polymerization is really good because if our opponent tries to affect Veiler or even Infinite Impermanence or Alistair on Summon, if they have a monster on their side of the field, you can easily just go into this to be able to fuse into pretty much any of your other monsters that you have, and be able to, of course, resolve your copy of Alistair the Invoker. Then we, of course, run the 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster. I really like maining 1 copy, pretty much during any format, because sometimes our opponents can run floodgates that we can't really deal with all too well, so just being able to activate this to blow out their entire back row is just really powerful, and I think that this card should be a staple one of in most going second decks. And then to wrap up the main deck, we do run 3 copies of Triple Tactics Talent, because this card easily can just steal a monster from our opponent, as well as, of course, draw some cards, or even look at our opponent's hand, choose 1 card, and then shuffle them into the deck to help get rid of hand traps or even combo starters for their own. So this card is just really powerful in the deck. Continuing on into the extra deck, we do, of course, run the 1 copy of Alistair the Invoker of Madness. This card just says that this card's name becomes Alistair the Invoker while it's on the field or in the graveyard. This card also says if a fusion monster is summoned while you control this monster, except during the damage step, you can discard 1 card, and if you do, add 1 Invocation or Book of Law, which, of course, as we talked about, is the card that not many people run. However, it's really powerful just to be able to get another fusion monster onto the field by getting rid of 1 of your other ones, just so that way you can do just a little bit more damage. Continuing on, we do run 1 copy of Salamangreat Almirage, as well as 1 copy of Artemis the Magistus Moon Maiden. These cards are both in here for the same reason, just so that way you can be able to go into Purgatrio, or your copy of Mechaba, depending on what you need. But both of these cards you can easily link off your Alistair that you summoned, just so that we can be able to make a turn 1 monster pretty easily. And then, of course, to wrap up the link monsters, we do run the 1 copy of Crusadia Equimax. This card just says that this card gains attack equal to the combined original attack of all monsters this card points to, and also the only downside to this card is monsters this card points to cannot attack. So pretty much one of my favorite things that you can do with this deck is, of course, be able to set this up, possibly give your opponent 1 of your Kaijus. So in this case, we'll just give them Jizukiru, and then, of course, we will more than likely end on some fusion monsters like Purgatrio or even Agoetes. So one of my main things that I like about this, even if you don't go into that, we can just say you go into Mechaba to be able to stop your opponent from hand trapping you or something. One of my favorite things about this, of course, being with the Book of Law that we talked about earlier, is you would first of all attack with your Equimax, and then you can activate Book of the Law to be able to get rid of your Mechaba or Agoetes, just so that way you can be able to summon out another monster like your Purgatrio in a separate zone from where the Equimax is pointing to, so that way you can, of course, just continue on with your plays dealing a lot of damage. But I just wanted to give you guys that quick explanation of why we run the Equimax and the Book of Law. So that's going to wrap it up for the links. And of course, continuing on into the fusion monsters, we do run 2 copies of Mechaba. Mechaba just says that once per turn, when a spell or trap card is activated or a monster effect, quick effect, you can send the same type of card from your hand to the graveyard to negate the activation. If you do, banish that card. And then of course, we do run 1 copy of Invoked Mekk-Knight. I think that's how you pronounce it. I could be completely wrong and making a fool of myself. But this card says that if this card is special summoned, or if a monster is special summoned to your opponent's field, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls and destroy it. You can only use that effect once per turn. However, this card also says that once per turn you can banish 1 fusion monster from your graveyard, and this card gains attack equal to that banished monster's attack until the end of your opponent's turn. So this card could potentially get really big if you were to banish your Invoked Mekka or any of your other ones that we'll go into in just a moment. Continuing on, we do run one copy of Invoked Mekk-Knight. The reason why we run this card is because this card gains 200 attack for each card your opponent controls. This card can also attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. This card says that if this card attacks a defense position monster, you can inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent. So therefore, this card is just there so we can be able to swing into a bunch of our opponent's monsters and just clear boards fairly easily. Then we, of course, run one copy of Invoked Regen. This card just says that once returned during either player's turn, you can target one face-up monster on the field, change it to face down defense position. So we do run this card. You can even run like a instant fusion. I'm thinking that I might drop one of the copies of Nibiru so that we can get instant fusion to be able to summon out Regen. The only downside, of course, to running instant fusion is if you do summon Regen, you gotta flip it face down, and so that way it's protected. However, honestly, I just think that being able to use Book of Law on this, like if you know that you can't clear out a game, you can just summon this, and it has a decent attack line, so therefore you can just be able to flip a monster during your main phase too. Then, of course, to wrap up the invoked monsters, we do run one copy of Invoked Mekk-Knight. This card says that if a player's monster effect attempts to activate, none of that player's monsters can activate their effects for the rest of this turn. So practically this card just locks your opponent into using only one monster effect per turn. The only downside, of course, is that this card does lock you into only one monster effect. However, hopefully if you summon this, you won't really need to go into it all too much. Also, if you do decide to run the instant fusion, I do want to go into this. I would suggest cutting Kaliga and possibly even another Mekaba, so that way you can run cards like Millenniumize Restrict or even regular Thousand Eyes Restrict to be able to take an opponent's monster. There are so many things you can run using the instant fusion. Only reason why I don't run it is because I think that it's a bit of a sacky one-of, but honestly in a bit more testing, if I like it, that's what I'm going to be doing. However, those are just what I would change if you guys do want to run the instant fusion to increase the amounts of plays that this deck can do. So that's going to be it for the invoked monsters. Continuing on, we actually do have, of course, super poly targets. We do run one copy of Garuro, Wings of Resonant Life. Of course, this card says that any damage that this monster deals to your opponent is doubled, which is really powerful, but the main reason why we also run this is for our copy of Ultimate Slayers, because this card says that if this card is into the graveyard, you can just draw one card. Then, of course, we do run one copy of Starving Venom Fusion Dragon just to be able to fuse off two dark monsters on the field to be able to clear our opponent's field just a little bit easier. And then, of course, to wrap up the extra deck, we do run a few more Ultimate Slayer targets. So, of course, we run Elder Entity and Tis, because this card says that if it's into the graveyard, you can pop one card on your opponent's side of the field, which is just really powerful. One copy of Tri-Brigade Ferrojeet, the Barren Blossom, because this card can help put any bricks that you might have in your deck that are stuck in your hand back into your deck, so that way you can draw one card. And then, of course, we do run the one copy of Cypher Lord Omega. This card just says that if this card is in your graveyard, you can target one other card in your graveyard, shuffle both this card and that other card back into the deck, so that way you can just be able to recur some of your resources. So that's going to be about it for the video, guys. Please be sure to leave a like and comment down below what you guys would change to make this deck even better than it already is. And let me know if you guys want to build this deck, because it's a very fun deck and easy to break your opponent's board. Be sure to go down into the description to check out my Twitter, where I try to keep uploading pretty constantly over there, so that way you guys can stay up to date with what I'm doing. And it's also where I'm going to be teasing future videos from here on out. So that being said, guys, that's going to be about it. See ya.